Well, here we are at the conclusion of the year of Mark. So, of course, we'll be reading John. But this wonderful feast of Christ the King, a relatively modern feast in the church here, and a wonderful one, as I said. So, welcome, Karen, for this your first time from Laidlaw College, but in Otatahi Christchurch. Lovely to have you on board. Been looking forward to this. Welcome back, Mannie. Welcome back, Lisa. Mannie in the Wairarapa and Lisa in the Manawatu. And Lisa comes bearing gifts of background.
Well, just a couple of things about this reading. So I think it's worth noticing that Jesus' life is bookended, if there is such a word, by the question of kingship. So in Matthew's gospel, we are told that, sometime after Jesus was born, the Magi, who had some leadership role in a foreign empire, come looking for him, and they ask Herod, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We are here to worship him." And so he is so close to the end of Jesus' life. The major indictment against him is that he's claimed to be a king. And far from coming to worship him, the leaders of his community are planning to kill him. The second point I'd make is that the reading for today presents us with different images of kingship. So we have Pilate here, who is a representative of the Roman Empire, a cruel, harsh regime which rules with violence. We have the leaders of the Jews, mortal enemies of Rome, just outside the palace, willing to kill a man in order to retain power. And we have Jesus, a man who healed the sick, fed thousands of people from a child's lunchbox, calmed the sea, raised the dead, a man who could, at this very moment, call legions of angels to defend him, and he does not do it because he's here to rescue his people. And so what does this tell us about kingship? What does it tell us about power? What does it tell us about Jesus?
Well, that's going to be challenging in itself, but we'll now come to the challenge, and we'll ask you, Mannie, to start off talking about what you find challenging.
Thank you, Lisa, for the bookends that you talked about, kingship. I wanted to go slightly off piece, and I hope someone will rescue me as we go through. What I found challenging are two things. What is the truth, and whose truth are we to focus on? And I think these are two of the biggest challenges from this short passage, because when Pilate asked Jesus if he is the king of the Jews, Pilate, I think, clearly wanted a simple yes or no answer. The sad reality is that Pilate's question was not entirely innocent of bias or preconceived beliefs or notions of his own. The very fact that Jesus was brought to Pilate was an indication that a conclusion had been reached by the chief priests about the claim of kingship. There's a challenging side to things when we claim to know what the true or correct answer is. The truth does not belong to one person.
Gone right to the heart of a topical issue in society at the moment about what is truth, and I guess it's rather good to hear you plugging a bit about Jesus there. Thank you, Karen. Let's go to you and talk to us about challenge.
Yes, I think the biggest challenge for me was Jesus saying, "My kingdom is not of this world," because it discombobulates everything that I can touch, see, feel, stand on, control, manipulate. And I'm struck that I don't think he's saying that God's kingdom is spiritual but not political. He's rather challenging Pilate, but us through Pilate, I think, to expand our vision and imagine a different way of being in the world, politics included. So this all challenges, I think, my own tendency to use the power that I have to keep order of my own world, to order it in my way, in my time, for my very good reasons that I think are the best. The kingdom being not of this world also challenges and probes those parts of my life where I've been too willing to play the game of the world that we live in, to collude for the sake of the status quo, which ultimately too often equates to my own comfort. And the trouble, I think, and the challenge here is that, as Pilate discovered, playing the game too often means narrowing our vision. It means overlooking injustice. It means homogenizing diversity. It means normalizing those things which maintain the comfort of the powerful and marginalizing anything or anyone who would challenge it by making us feel uncomfortable.
I will treasure the phrase homogenizing diversity for a long time. Thank you, Karen. Let's go to you, Lisa, and talk about challenge for you now.
Oh, well, I'm kind of going back to Mannie's idea. The line that jumped out to me was, I came into the world to testify to the truth. You know, when we think about why Jesus came, we tend to go to John 3:16. But here he says the reason why he came. And truth, as Pilate goes on to note, is a big and scary word. It's especially scary in a world that believes in relative truth, alternative facts. Well, that's your truth. This is my truth. But Jesus says he came to testify to the truth. And that's not just the truth about us, that we are loved, that he came to save us, but the truth about the nature of God. And here in this scene, watching God hold back that awesome power, we see something that goes beyond human understanding. And so I think two challenging things here. One is that we are called to stand in awe of that power. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that I think we have all been infected by the world's attitude to truth. And so the challenge is to let go of the idea of my truth and look to God.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So we've got big questions to wrestle with. They're challenging. Let's drag the good news out here, because I think that could be quite exciting. And Karen, I'll come back to you. Find some good news for me.
Well, actually, the good news for me is exactly the same as the challenge. My kingdom is not of this world, which I think is hugely encouraging as I look at the world around us that's so tied up in the lies. So the good news, I think, for those who are caught in a game with rules made by those set to gain the most at the expense of those destined to lose the most, is that this is not the same world as the one that we occupy. And again, in the good news bit, I did go into, for this I came into the world to testify to the truth. And it reminded me of a book by John Mark Comer, Live No Lies, where he defines truth as the way things really are, or the thing that we bump into when we get it wrong, a little bit like discovering gravity when we decide we can fly. And so I think in a world which relies on entrenched lies about who we are as human beings, about what will satisfy us and bring us real joy, about what a good life or a life worth living really looks like, Jesus's incarnation, his life, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, witness to the reality that we are each of infinite worth, beloved by God, that power is for the sake of others, that life is found in loving God and loving neighbor in the dailiness of ordinary life and relationships. And that in Christ, a life worth living is within reach right here, right now, not someplace else. And that is the way things really are, the truth.
Beautiful. Thank you, Karen. And yeah, that's certainly bringing the good news into focus. Let's ask you, Mannie, where you find that coming home.
In the events just prior to this passage, Jesus willingly submitted to Judas's betrayal. Jesus also prevented his arrest from becoming violent as Peter was prepared to defend Jesus with the sword. This is a very significant truth that I find both humbling and empowering. When faced with great danger and threat to his well-being and ultimately his life, Jesus was calm and in control. We too often face challenging situations that threaten our well-being. But these short verses, and indeed the full chapter, Jesus is providing us with an example of bravery and calm control that is hard for us to emulate, but it is certainly empowering. And in verse 37, Jesus says, everyone on the side of truth, listen to me. This serves as a strong reminder that when we have the real and genuine truth on our side, we should have nothing to fear. That's good news for me.
Thank you, Mannie. Lisa, where will you find some good news for us?
Well, I was like Karen in that I saw the good news as the flip side of the challenge that I identified. So the idea that truth isn't relative, that there is the truth, and we are invited to see it, to worship it, to fall on our knees in gratitude I come back again and again to the idea that we are so small, but we are loved by a God would hold back power that is beyond anything we can imagine, just to save us and not to save himself. So, Jesus is the king. He is an absolute monarch. He is king of heaven and earth, and he holds that power to love us and to set us free. And in a world that seems to be enthralled by the exercise of toxic power, which seems to be freewheeling towards global collapse, and where the very idea of truth seems very nebulous, I think this is good news indeed.
And thank you indeed. Well, let's find where the rubber hits the road for us. I hate that cliche, but I like using it. Let's go to you once more, Karen, and talk about so what.
I think this passage did get under my skin a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about the places where I play the game, really, where I can kid myself that I'm in control, or where I can manipulate things to suit myself quietly at the expense, really, of others, or where I collude just by my silence because it's too tricky to speak up, where I use my agency to perpetuate the status quo rather than rock the boat. And I'm sitting with the reality that rocking the boat by speaking and living truthfully, especially when that life is lived in the gaze of the powerful, involves getting wet. It involves being a nuisance. It involves maybe even getting tipped out of the water completely. And finally, I'm reminded, and this is an encouragement to me as I locate myself, that even Jesus didn't live his truth life alone, but chose a company of men and women to walk with him, to lean into that truth alongside.
Thank you. Lisa, so what?
I think the so what for me is my idea of God too small. So, we like images of Jesus as our friend, our shepherd, our guide, our companion, and they're very, very important and truthful images of God. But maybe they have to be balanced with the God of Job. That Jesus was with the Father before time began. He is the Lamb seated on the throne, worshipped by the assembly of heaven. He is the King who was crucified so that we might live in his playground, which is eternity. I think often that's too much for us to bear. But maybe when we're tempted to despair of this world, we can remember that God's timeline is different to ours. His truth is not confined by time and space. He's got this. And I do think it's too much for mere mortals to bear most of the time. But I think on this day, on the feast of Christ the King, and I'm going into a hymn now, let us worship the King with all his power and love, our shield and defender, the Ancient of Days, vermillioned in splendor and girded with praise. That's our King.
Thank you indeed. And for a final word, Mannie, now I should mention I spent a lot of time in Waka, the plural, in the colors that Mannie is wearing. Maybe you want to talk about Waka, but anyway, tell me one so what from you.
I'm going to steal a line from Karen when, Karen, you said Jesus chose men and women to walk with him. And that is the example that Jesus gave. So what? Well, Jesus knew that the truth is sometimes more than a fact, more than an answer or an experience, and it cannot be possessed. Rather, it is a life to be lived. In this exchange with Pilate in this particular passage, Jesus revealed that Pilate only wanted to know the bare facts. Jesus never asked us to own or claim the truth about him or anything else. Instead, Jesus asks us to belong to the truth, to let ourselves be possessed by his truth and to listen to his voice. So the so what is allowing the words of Jesus to be a part of our daily walk so that we are men and women who walk alongside Jesus's teachings.
Well, what a king to serve. Thank you for wonderful breaking open of this exciting passage. Lisa, Karen, Mannie, thanks for being on board.